I'm delighted to welcome today a rather unusual guest on the podcast. This young man, Andrew Thorp King, has written a book called Failure Rules. He's just holding it up for those who are listening on podcasts. Failure Rules, the 5 rules of failure for entrepreneurs, creatives and authentics. So welcome, Andrew, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Elaine. Nice to be here.
And also for those listening on podcast, not able to see the video, Andrew is covered in tattoos, has got an immaculate beard, and is smoking a huge fat cigar. So again, not the average guest that we get on the health side of these podcasts, but you'll be going on the bright business mind side of the podcast, Andrew. So you're obviously a controversial character by what's on your website. So tell us the website address so people can have a look at that.
Sure. So it's andrewthorpking.com. There's no E on the end of Thorp. So it's THORP. So andrewthorpking.com is the web address.
Okay, thank you. So have you always been controversial? Were you born controversial, or is it something that you've kind of acquired as you've gone along?
I don't know that controversial is the way that I would describe myself. If I'm found that way, then I suppose that's just the way it is. I think the word authentic comes to mind, right? So that's part of the subtitle of the book is it's Failure Rules with an exclamation mark, kind of a fist in the air proclamation that I'm going to find a way to make my failures an asset in my life when they occur, even though I try to avoid them. And then the subtitle is for entrepreneurs, creatives, and authentics. And so it's that last word, authentics, which I probably somewhat invented the use of that as a noun in the book. I do define it in the definition of terms in the book. And I think that it's the idea that, you kind of, for entrepreneurs, for creatives especially, and for people trying to live a life where they're trying to maximize their highest usefulness in the world and to identify their unique talent stack, their unique way of being in the world. It's the idea of listening to that often muzzled, often kind of quieted internal spirit voice in us that helps to inform us in key decision points in our life and helps to inform us in how we make our way in the world, right? And I think when you're in touch with that, you can actually manifest as your authentic self. And for me, maybe that talent stack or that group of apparent contradictions manifest in such a way where I seem controversial, but I strive to do that, right? I strive to align with that voice inside, to not suppress it, to manifest the world in an authentic way. And maybe that makes me controversial. I don't know. As you mentioned, I am smoking a cigar. It's one of the loves of my life. I am covered in tattoos. I am an old punk rocker, but I'm also an executive banker. I'm also a father. I'm also, have kind of deeply held spiritual beliefs, even though they're non-orthodox. I also obviously I'm a writer. So I think there's a lot of texture to who I am. And I think even in the disparate interests that kind of come together to make up my personality, that's they work in an authentic way.
Brilliant. Very well said. That's a great, I've just made some notes here. That's a really good description about being authentic. And authentic is a word that's cropping up time and time again now in all kinds of posts that I'm reading, particularly on LinkedIn, and the authenticity. So when we are who we are at home, who we are out in the public, if we are truly authentic, what you see is what you get wherever you are. But so many people in life don't show up authentic, in my view. They're presented with a mask, and
Yes.
They're maybe making out that everything is wonderful, but actually it's a pile of shit at the back behind, and it's not a good thing to fess up that you're not doing too well. So, and then we've got a lot of young people now have kind of gone the other way. So they're spilling their guts out all over the place, and it's just so not nice to see. And there's somewhere in the middle, I think, that the authenticity piece really needs to kind of take hold, meeting the old and the new. So you and I are no spring chickens, if I might say so. I'm certainly not. And I think as we go over life, we learn about the true value in the authenticity, and being comfortable in our own skin, which a lot of people aren't. And I think that's where a problem lies. So going to your book, you mentioned 5 rules. On your website, it says something like get to use using the F word. Well, the F word in your context is failure, isn't it?
That's correct. Yep, that's the F word. Learn the F word, because after it sucks, failure rules. But it first usually sucks. That's right.
So you mentioned 5 rules. What are the 5 rules?
Yeah, so failure rule number 1 is failure purifies. And it's the idea that the phoenix must burn to emerge. That oftentimes when we encounter failure, if we're able to be objective observers of our failure events, as opposed to emotional participants, which is hard to do. There's going to be a bit of that no matter what. But if we're able to step back and out of the emotional piece, become objective observers of our failures, then we can often find ways to take the energy of our failure event, figure out how it might be able to shape us into the next version of ourselves and reinvent ourselves, and optimize it and leverage and metabolize it so that it might even become an event that defines us in a critical way as we move forward into success and shapes us. It's the idea that sometimes our failures are necessary because they do purify us, because sometimes old thinking needs to die, new thinking needs to emerge. Old ways of being need to dissipate, new ways of being need to come into existence. And sometimes it does take our failure events to do that. Now, obviously, failure is something you always want to avoid. This book is not about failure porn. It's not about worshiping at the twisted altar of willful and self-induced failure. It's about recognizing that oftentimes when we are living our authentic life and we're going after very difficult things or unorthodox paths, particularly as an entrepreneur, as a creative, that when we do that, we will encounter failure likely more often and sometimes more sharply. So even though we are planning to avoid it, we must prepare ourselves premeditatively on how we're going to encounter it, how we're going to observe it, metabolize it, allow it to work through us, and help it to be something that shapes us into kind of a wider version of our authentic self as we move forward in the world.
Very well put. And that's it's so true that we have to, before anything can change, it has to break, doesn't it? And some people see that as failure. Other people see that as the next step to transformation. And we're seeing that in the world at the moment. You mentioned you're a banker, the banking systems, they're all falling to pieces. All these new things are coming online now. We can't have the new without the old, generally speaking, in any form of life. So that's really good. So it purifies and burn. You have to burn it to emerge. I think I love that phrase. How did you, before we go on to the other, the 4 rules, how did you get into this? What prompted you to write the book, Andrew?
It was the tail end of 2013. I was walking through 2 twin failure events in my life. I had just kind of resigned from a COO position in an online lending business that I was part owner in. And it was a very tumultuous kind of business divorce. And that had rearranged my financial life, where I was leaning on other income sources and really had to reorganize things and figure out my way forward. And at the same time, I was on the precipice of a marital divorce at the time. And so I think it was those 2 kind of linchpins in my life kind of falling apart and coming into disarray, where I was reflecting on a beach walk about all the different kind of off-road entrepreneurial adventuring that I had been through in my 20s and my 30s, and the tumult of that. And what were the lessons that I had learned? Everything from owning a gym to running record labels, to being a financial planner, to doing a bodybuilding competition, to writing a spy novel, all the different things I had done. What was the kind of overarching lessons that I had learned from the ups and downs, the failures, the missteps, and the value of it all. And I was listening to punk rock, as I do. I was listening to the song Ace of Spades by Motorhead, and Hard Times by the Cro-Mags. And listen to Hard Times by the Cro-Mags. Singer for the Cro-Mags wrote the foreword of the book. He's also a triathlete and author. His name's John Joseph. I just was convicted to write a book on the value of failure And I was thinking of the Winston Churchill quote that success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And like, that was kind of my thread, was no matter what happened to me, I was detached from the external world, and I was attached to my enthusiasm, which was an endorphin of my spirit that allowed me to go from failure to failure without that loss of enthusiasm. And that was kind of the thread that kept me going. And I decided to write a whole book about it. So that day I wrote some rough notes. Over the years, from draft to draft to draft, it revealed its shape, it revealed its form, and these kind of rules, these overarching rules kind of became apparent. And under each one, I kind of hang various chapters that have their own sub lessons, usually attached to an anchor quote from some sort of well-known person.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Is it available on audiobook?
Yes, it's on audiobook too. I had Jay Aseng, who's an actor who was on the show Twin Peaks on Showtime. He did the audio version, real great kind of urgent cadence, and it's a good listen.
Brilliant. I'm going to get that as my next purchase. I it's the wrong analogy, but I eat audiobooks these days. Often I'll go through another day while I'm toodling about doing whatever I'm doing. I'll be listening to it, and it's just a fabulous way to learn. And so many true life books like yours can teach us so many things. There's so much that we can learn. Every day is a school day, isn't it? So what are the other lessons, other rules, not the lessons, the rules?
Failure rule number 2 is nothing is safe, right? So it's the idea that, you ought go after your dreams, but you ought to do it carefully, because nothing is safe in this world, particularly your dreams. So as you kind of chase your dreams, or go after what is your North Star pursuit, your aspirational, conception of your highest manifestation of your uniqueness in the world, that you have to remember that nothing is safe. And you should not pretend that it is. So, one of the, I do quote Lemmy Kilmister of Motorhead when he talks about the concept of nothing is safe in the book. I also kind of point to other various examples, including the show Dirty Jobs by Mike Rowe. He had an episode where he called the episode Safety Third. And he really explores the concept that we ought to challenge this notion of walking through life with safety being the first priority all the time, that we need to weigh that against competing priorities. And sometimes safety ought to be first, and safety ought always be considered in our decisions, whether they be some sort of decision about our physical health, or decision about our financial health, or decision about our relationship, life, whatever it might be. But it ought not always be the highest value, that there's often values that are higher than safety. And if you're living a life pegged to safety, first and foremost, you're probably living a small life. You're probably not manifesting all that you ought manifest in the world. And in my view, if you're a safety file, as I coined the term in the book, you're probably going to, in some way, shape, or form, be sick physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, because you're living a cloistered life.
Interesting, and that feeds into what I do. So I'm a health mentor, and I also specialize in a model of personality typing called DISC, the DISC model of personality typing. And I find
very familiar with the birds. Yep.
And again, I find with the people that I'm mentioning through their health and well-being, those people are the introverted safety files, as you refer to them, which is a great title. They are more ill than people like us who are more extroverted, out there, authentic, take me as I am, like me or not, this is who I am. Whereas other people who are more in the safety packaging, and they're sitting on the fence and they can't make a decision, and this, that, and the other. I want to give them equal amounts. I never know whether to hug them or slap them, because they're harming themselves with their health and well-being piece, which is what you just alluded to, and it's evidenced by the way that their health situation comes out. So brilliant. So purify, then nothing is safe. What's number 3?
Number 3 is money is spiritual, which seems like a strange insertion into this suite of rules, but it's really the idea that when you're confronting failure, particularly of an entrepreneurial sort or a financial sort or a socioeconomic sort, viewing money in its proper way as an agnostic tool. It's neither good nor bad. It's the way that you use it. And then when used properly, money is really a thank you note, where it is a measure of placed value that measures your gratitude for a product or a service in either direction, whether you're receiving it or giving it. And that if you're avoiding the failure territories, the failure edges of envy and greed, which I really view as malevolent twin siblings, that they're really kind of two manifestations of the same spirit, and envy and greed. If you're avoiding those lanes and you're using money properly, it really can be this somewhat spiritual tool that can help lift you out of poverty, can help bless you as you allow it to flow through you when you're able to earn money and able to be, charitable. And it's the idea that viewing money in such a way can be part of a strategy to really address failure and get out of failure. And even the fluidity of finance, even the fluidity of social mobility that can then occur because of viewing money this way. So I've gone up and down, right? I've made a lot of money. I've lost it all several times. And so for me, viewing that money that way as a spiritual tool, knowing that I can be non-attached to the material world, yet still dip into it and maximize it and find ways to ascend financially, even after falling, it really gives me this somewhat reverent view of the power, the spiritual power of money, as a recovery tool out of failure, and as an instrument to enable my life to flourish and the lives of those around me.
Absolutely. It's uncanny how people come into your life when the time is right. Only yesterday, I was talking with my coach about the money side of things, because money has never been a thing, thing of value to me. I've had it or I haven't had it. If I have it, I give it away. If I haven't had it, we all muck in together, and that's it. But I'm realizing more and more now, with the ups and downs, how my view on money, which has been conditioned from a child, of course, that's how we all start off, because money was never spoken about. It was never a thing. But to be of gratitude, and of service, and there has to be an exchange of service. And that's where I've come unstuck. He said to me, your kindness has kept you poor. Well, I've had ups and downs, and now things are changing because of my mental attitude towards money is changed. So things are now changing, and it's amazing how, spiritually, with the gratitude, which I have anyway, everything will flow as it's meant to. So uncanny that's propped up, but it's not, is it? Because there's no such things as coincidence. Things happen for a reason. People come into your life at the right time, and so on. Fabulous. So number 4, what's number 4?
Failure rule number 4, it's called build your thing 1 and thing 2 dependency. It's a failure prevention rule. Thing 1 and thing 2 have nothing to do with Cat in the Hat or Dr. Seuss. Thing 1 is an enabler pursuit, and thing 2 is your North Star dream pursuit. And they work together. So your thing 1 might be a low meaning pursuit, a utilitarian pursuit that gives you scaffolding and structure and gives you a little more mitigation against the risk to then go after your long-term aspirational dream pursuit, right? So the classic idea would be holding in a 9-to-5 job and having a side hustle on the side. But there's many other manifestations of this dynamic and this dependency. And so I go through some real creative ones that entrepreneurs have kind of invoked that I've witnessed, right? So thinking of these 2 brothers I knew from Lebanon, they're anonymized in the book. They came over to the U.S. and their pursuit of happiness was to own their own businesses. That's how they wanted to see themselves flourish in the new world, or in the new country, in the U.S. So when they came here, they didn't have any seed money, but they wanted to open some retail establishments. So their thing 1 enabler that was low meaning, utilitarian, but enabled their long-term dream was they went and worked for Disney on Ice. Disney on Ice paid for their lodging, their food. They had no home. They lived on the road. They had no expenses. They were able to bank all their money, but they were, selling merchandise to, the moms of little girls who love princesses, and this is what they did for several years, married to the road. They then took that seed money and ended up opening a gym, cigar lounges, nightclubs, gas stations in this one city. And they built their kind of retail empire on the backs of this very creative, sacrificial, low-meaning enabler pursuit. And so it's the idea that you can't just go after your dreams oftentimes straightforward. You usually have to build structure around it to enable them. And that structure, is not always going to have the highest meaning. It's going to have lower meaning. At the same time, if that structure actually enables you to reach your dreams, the arc of your narrative over time becomes more rich, because even that low meaning enabler pursuit can have high meaning when it's coupled with the realization of your dream pursuit because of the story. I mean, just this story I'm telling about these two brothers from Lebanon, part of the story is how they did it, and how they did it matters, and how they did it speaks to their ingenuity and their character and their vision. So it's that kind of idea that you don't just go straight after, your dreams all the time. You have to be creative. You have to be practical. You have to be patient. And you have to know that nothing is safe. Your dream might not even come true, might not even come into reality, but it's worth chasing anyhow because you want to destroy future regret. Even if it doesn't come to fruition, you need to know as you look back in your life that anything that burned in you, you chased until it was either satiated, came into existence, failed, or partially succeeded. And it's that kind of idea.
If only, two words that I hear people say, when you speak to people who are older, many of them say, if only I'd done this, if only I'd done that.
You broke up just a little bit there, Elaine.
Okay. I was saying about older people, so many older people will say, if only I'd done this, if only I'd taken the chance, if only I'd followed my dream. And that's what spoke to me when you were saying about rule number 4. It's also so many people get overwhelmed. Well, if you start with a lower hanging fruit, so to speak, on your thing number 1, and then use that as a stepping stone. Yeah, brilliant. I like this book. It's genius. I can't wait to get hold of it. Number 5.
Number 5 is potentially the most powerful of the rules. It's you are not your failures. It's the idea that you must find a way to detach from the negative optics of failure, to decouple your identity from failure, and to not over-identify with these failure events, that they are events. While they might reflect gaps in judgment, gaps in your own decision-making, they might just simply occur around you or enshroud you because we live in an imperfect world that is unsafe. Just mere participation in the human condition can cause failure events, sickness, war, the volatility of the free market, whatever it might be. Either way, we need to detach our identity from our failure events. And so, one of the examples I talk about in the book is this gentleman, Elgin James, who was a mixed race kid from Boston. He grew up in the hardcore punk rock scene, became a bit of a street kid, was part of a subculture of punk rock called straight edge, which is essentially an ideology that abstains from drugs and alcohol. But he became particularly, negative in this, in that he was a puritanical kind of hardliner and ended up being a leader of a violent street gang that beat up those that drank or smoked or what have you at punk rock shows throughout the Northeast, throughout the country. They were even featured on an episode of Gangland on the History Channel. But Elgin eventually turned away from violence. He eventually walked away from that life, was able to decouple his identity from his past while still being responsible for the consequences of his actions, which is a key point. And he ended up being sentenced for an extortion charge based on his previous life in the gang. And the paradox of that day was that was the same day that he ended up getting a deal with Universal Pictures for one of his films, because he had detached from the identity, of his failure events, turned away from it, still took responsibility for his actions, but pursued his highest meaning, his most unique calling as a screenwriter, ended up being a mentee of Robert Redford. Robert Redford wrote a letter to the judge on the day of his sentencing, And then, Elgin went on to be successful and totally detach himself from the old life. He was the screenwriter for Mayans, MC, I think it's called, on FX, which was a spinoff to the hit series Sons of Anarchy, and has done some great things in Hollywood and really uses creativity for some good and moving forward art in the world. And so it's those kind of stories where people don't get stuck in their past or failure events, even like this, like a moral failure, and they're able to move forward and reinvent themselves.
Brilliant. And there's a saying, isn't there? Failure is only failure if you say it's a failure. And if it's not, detaching yourself from anything that happens enables you to go through life in a much better frame. So you're able to look at the thing without the emotional thing, which makes the thing worse, and so on and so forth. So yeah, fascinating. And I can't wait to get hold of it. Remind us of your website, Andrew, for the listeners.
Sure, it's andrewthorpking.com. No E on the end of Thorp. From there, you can connect to me on Instagram. You can connect to my YouTube channel where I do some great produced videos, animating the content of the book in a different way. I have a merchandise page there for some great merchandise connected to the book. You can also get a free Failure Rules mini course by signing up for the email list with some great, unique distilled content from the book. Lots of things you can kind of do to explore what I'm doing with the book.
Fabulous. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, Andrew. I can't wait, as I say, to get hold of it at the risk of repeating myself, but also delving into some of these goodies as well. Thank you so much.
Great to meet you, Elaine. Have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.